Hi everyone! I just wanted to share a few thoughts with you on this book that I finished over the weekend called The Moon is Down by John Steinbeck. And I'm just going to do a very informal review of it today because it's Memorial Weekend and I've got things to do. But just wanted to go over this a bit and talk about why I absolutely loved this book. Okay, so this was published in 1942, and it was intended to be really just a propaganda piece, inspiring the Allies, specifically European Allies, in World War II, and it was literally distributed as kind of, literature to encourage and inspire people, and as such, it was banned in Italy and obviously any Nazi occupied territory at that time. So that's kind of why this was written. I think if I remember correctly, the introduction was saying how Steinbeck had actually written it with America in mind. He was going to have it set in America, but it was like the publishers or something didn't like that. So they decided to put it set in Europe, in an anonymous town. And really, as it turns out, I think that place it was set in was actually Norway. It just wasn't called out as being Norway. But Steinbeck actually got an award from King Haakon of Norway for this book. And there's also a really good movie about King Haakon the Seventh. I apologize if I'm missaying his name. There's a good movie about him called The King's Choice. If you haven't read it, I would definitely recommend it. It's about how he stood up to the Nazis in 1940, I want to say. Anyway, long story short, that's the background of this story. And as far as what it's about, there's this town in anonymized Norway, or this European town, that gets invaded by some anonymous soldiers who are obviously the Nazis. And there's this Mayor Orden, and his wife that are awaiting the arrival of Colonel Lancer, whose people have just overtaken the town, disarmed them, and conquered them. And so it's kind of funny. The whole first chapter is almost this comedy of manners because Mayor Orden and his wife, this is a completely new experience for them. They don't know how to react to being conquered. And, the mayor's like, what, do we offer them refreshments? Like, what do we do here? And so it's just kind of funny at first, and then the story gets gradually darker and darker as this occupation plays out. And Orden is trapped in a difficult position. Does he appease these invaders to protect the people? And also, the risk of that is that his people trust him less and less. Or does he try to thwart the colonel's plans, which puts his life in danger, the mayor's life, and, any little good influence he could have is then going to be gone. So it's a very difficult dilemma. This town is also a coal mining town, so that's their main business there, and the colonel wants the work to keep going, keep putting output, of course, taking over the coal for his own purposes. So that's kind of, how it affects the townspeople immediately. This is my first book I've read by Steinbeck. I've watched a couple movies that were adaptations of his work, The Grapes of Wrath, which I want to say was also from the 40s, 1940 with Henry Fonda. And I also watched the 1992 version of Mice and Men, which was really good. But I've never read anything by him until this little novella. It's only about like 110 pages or so. And I was not really expecting it to be very subtle because The Grapes of Wrath was very on the nose. It ended with this rather preachy speech by one of the characters, and Of Mice and Men was a really good story, but it also ended in a very dramatic and tragic and horrifying way. So I was kind of expecting some of the same in this book. Not so. And it could be because he had written it with the awareness of it becoming a play, which it was performed as a play the same year it was published. It kind of, is very focused and very character driven and subtle. We get to actually meet these Nazi characters in depth. Colonel Lancer, in particular, is interesting because he has his own conscience and feelings, and, he remembers World War I, but he keeps talking about how he purposely compartmentalizes those memories and his conscience so he can carry out his orders. And then it also talks about his men and their growing anxiety because they thought the townspeople would love them as I don't know why they thought the townspeople would love them, but apparently, through their ideological zeal, they thought, they're gonna greet us as, I guess, enlightened beings coming to make their world better, and nothing could be further from the truth, especially because they started out their rule of this town by killing, I think, 6 people, so they get off to a very bad footing, and it gets worse from there, and these soldiers begin to hate living there. They begin to find various coping mechanisms and just wish they could go back home. So, it's interesting because in most propaganda that I've seen quite a bit of World War II propaganda at this point, from various old films from the 40s, and, I don't think that when you're making propaganda, you don't have to humanize the enemy, because that's not really the point. The point is to rally your troops and your side to go defeat the enemy. But I loved that Steinbeck really got deep into these villains' characters. He knows that his readers, and he didn't know this, but even future readers, find Nazism to be completely despicable and horrific. And so he kind of can take that for granted as he develops these characters as human beings and exploring what we all desire in life as creatures from the same origin, and how ideologies like fascism eat away at our common humanity. So I really loved that. I think that just put this book on so much of a higher level than mere propaganda. I think it really challenges us to examine ourselves and to see, how many of us compartmentalize like Colonel Lancer does, and how many of us are more loyal to our political ideology than to our own neighbors, right? Like the shopkeeper in the story, Mr. Carell. So just really deep and eternal questions like that I just loved, and I think just elevates this book so much. There are a few female characters in this war story. So there's the mayor's wife, and there's the cook Annie, and then there's this other character named Molly, who each have their own roles to play in a small way. I would say my main quibble with this book was that the female characters were pretty tropey compared to the male characters, but it's a very short book, so I can kind of overlook that. Altogether, even if you're more pacifist leaning like I am, I think there's a lot that you can glean from this book, and even just the simple stand for liberty that the people take in here against the people invading them. They're acting in self-defense. I think that really resonates quickly with you. But again, it was the very dimensional villains that I think really make this book stand out, and I was really glad to read it. So that's The Moon is Down. Let me know if you've read it, if you've read anything else by Steinbeck that you would recommend, and I'll see you next time. Bye.